Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to our latest episode of the NorCal's developmental series on club development series. The NorCal Club Development Department exists to elevate soccer by helping develop clubs and club leaders. NorCal has an entire resource section of our website dedicated to this, including recordings of all our past webinars. I'd encourage everyone to go check it out at norcalpremier.com/club-development. You can also navigate to it in the main section of the NorCal website. Today, we are talking about how coaches and club leaders can foster player development environments outside of team training. The origin story of many of the world's best players often includes time spent with the ball outside of structured team training environments. And players learning to train on their own is a vital part of player development. While some players will always have an intrinsic motivation to improve on their own, many players need to be led there. Today, we're going to talk about some of the best practices around developing programs and systems to help train and develop on their own. Joining us for this conversation today is the founder of Techne Futbol, Yael Averbuch. In addition to founding Techne, Yael is the general manager and head of soccer operations for the New York, New Jersey Gotham FC in the NWSL. In addition, as a player, Yael played professionally in both the US and abroad for about 10 years and represented the US national team at every level, including 26 caps for our full national team. As we begin, if anyone in attendance has questions about any of the topics that we're talking about, please put them in the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to get to them either live or at the end. And with that, we are going to get going. So, Yael, again, thank you for being here. We're going to start with the most important topic. Gotham FC has had an amazing run to the NWSL Final this weekend. We're extremely grateful for you making the time to speak with us during this really important week for you and the team. So really the most important thing is, what's your prediction for the game Saturday?
Oh, that was it. You didn't prepare me for that question. Well, first of all, hi everybody. No, this is I'm very happy to talk about this. This is a very, not the Gotham thing. I'll give my prediction, but just in general, this topic of, players doing work outside of their team environments is very personal to me. And so it's something I enjoy talking about. I'm very passionate about. So I'm excited for the conversation, but a prediction, that's tough. I mean, honestly, I think sometimes in this games, it could really go either way. I have a really good feeling about where our team is right now mentally. And so I don't want to jinx us or anything, but I think we are going to perform really well in the game. But as we all know with soccer, that doesn't always lead to the result. So I think we are playing really well and we're on the rise and everyone is really, really motivated and bought in. So I think we're going to see our best possible performance, but I don't know where that lands us score-wise. So I can't actually give a score prediction. It was more of a performance prediction. I kind of skirted the question. I'm sorry. Okay, I couldn't do the score.
That's quite okay. As coaches, all of us, we know usually the performance is the things that we can control. The outcome often is not. So, obviously we wish you the best, and definitely made a Gotham fan out of some of us out here. So, best of luck to you.
I appreciate that.
So turning our attention to the real topic of today's conversation, can you give us an overview of why you believe players training on their own outside of structured environments is an important part of their development?
Yeah, so, like I said, this is all very personal to me because my entire experience thinking about this comes from my own personal journey as a soccer player. And I think one of the most impactful things for me in the sport was the realization that I could take ownership over how good I was, what my strengths and weaknesses were, and that it didn't always have to be in someone else's hands. It wasn't up to my parents to just drive me there and tell me what to do. It wasn't up to my coach to say, "Oh, you know what, you're the best one on the team," or "You're not good enough for this." I could actually control it. And so a lot of my thoughts on this are literally based on what I credit with allowing me to play at the highest level of the game. And so I think, at the most basic level of why this is important is that, quite simply, the better you are at something, the more fun it is. And I think we all know that from our own life experience, whether it's in soccer or something else. So for me, I found that as I improved and as I felt like I could get good at things and I could actually make myself good, the game became more fun. And I kind of got obsessed and I wanted to do it more and more. And I think it's so important in young people's lives to feel that first moment of, whoa, I actually got better. Like I put in the work, I did something on my own, and I actually feel like I got better. Because once you can feel that, and really it doesn't even have to be in soccer, really in anything, then I think you become even more motivated because you see the pathway to really becoming whoever you want, in this case, in the game. So I think like the most basic and obvious reason that it's important is so that players become better players, but also that they feel like they're in control of that. But it also goes so far beyond the soccer skills. And I think the personal investment and ownership is really impactful. I mean, we're talking about the life skills that can get developed that don't really get developed when you show up and you're with a team. You know, that's the time where you can see work ethic and leadership and understanding your role and all that. But when you're on your own, it's really about the dedication. It's about the commitment. It's about the personal investment and kind of self-respect, because when no one's holding you accountable, you have to, from within yourself, come up with, you know, why should you work hard? Why should you show up, and why should you stay 10 extra minutes to try to get it right? You know, why should you go out when it's raining and find a place to train? And those are the moments that I think as human beings, young people in this case, or really anyone through the game, can develop really important skill sets that honestly translate to pretty much anything you want to do in life. And so I think, you know, taking all of those pieces, kind of the ownership, the actual soccer skills, the life skills, it in the biggest picture is about developing a personal connection with the game. Because unfortunately we see even very talented players, you know, they have this end game. They want to make the varsity team, or they want to play in college, or even we see it at the professional level, they want to play pro, or even on the national team. I've seen this. But then after the playing career is done, it's like, okay, I'm done with this sport. You know, that's what it meant to me. I achieved on the field. And, you know, all of you sitting here clearly have a deeper connection with the game, or a reason why you're doing what you're doing. And I really believe that the players who find this personal relationship, whether it's through training on their own, through watching the game and experiencing the game outside of what someone's telling them to do when they show up at the field, are the ones who continue on to be coaches, to be maybe GMs or referees in all capacities, to end up doing broadcast and, you know, marketing, all these things surrounding the game. And so truly, I don't think there's a way, if you just show up and participate in the organized processes, there's not really a way to develop that personal connection. That takes the time on your own to understand what you really care about and who you are as a player, and what teams you like to support, what style of players you like to watch. And so there's so much about it that goes so far beyond like the basics of, you know, learning to improve your weaker foot or having a good first touch, which obviously all those things really help. And so, I mean, I could answer this question. This would probably take me an hour just to answer this question, as you guys can tell, but I just think it's probably the most important part of player development. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to go out and do hours and hours with a whole hundreds of soccer balls and do all that. It's just the little bits of engaging in the game when you're back home in your own environment because you want to, or because you see the benefit as an individual, and not just because your parent told you or your coach told you or someone's watching and holding you accountable to that. It's finding that self-accountability that I think it changes people's lives. Honestly, some of the best feedback I have gotten on, you know, on Techne Futbol, which is, it's an app platform, but really it's based on my own experience as a player. I tried to recreate it for others to experience through an app, but the best feedback we've gotten is much deeper than, oh, my kid made the A team or whatever. It's literally, you know, my player wasn't confident and they didn't enjoy the sport, and through doing this training they developed a love of the sport because they felt good about themselves. Or you know, my player, they did the mental training and the breathing exercises you had in the app, and they actually were in the hospital in an emergency and used that to calm themselves down. And like things like that, to me, they mean so much more than like the superficial, like, oh, my kid was MVP or whatever. So I think it goes, you know, it goes way far beyond the field.
I really love that because I think two things stand out to me in that answer, and I really want to highlight them because I think they're so important. One, we often hear, you know, like soccer is a really tough game to play if you don't have mastery of the ball, right? Like it can kind of be a tough experience. But I think the more important piece that comes through for me in that is the things that happen outside of sport, or what sport's real purpose is, right? A lot of times. And it's, we all have goals of trying to achieve something as a player or a coach. But the process that we go through is often a lot more important than the destination. And I love hearing how that is actually the most important piece of that, as opposed to obviously the getting better as a player. That's important as well, but what you learn and what you become as a part of that process is so just really happy for me to hear that coming from such a high level player person within the game. It's really, really cool. Moving on, once that starts, so once a player started, and in your experience, what do you think the keys to success for that individual player are in not just starting their own kind of training program, but maintaining it and being successful with it?
Yeah, I think understanding, what you just highlighted and what kind of the answer to the first question, so to speak, is the first key element, because if somebody doesn't understand why they're doing something, it's not going to last. So really understanding the why, and it might be a little different for everyone. Like someone might just be motivated because they got cut from a team and they're like, I want to get back on the team, or it's totally different. It's not that everyone has this big holistic journey and feels like, oh, I'm going to develop this love of the sport. Most of the time these are kids and they don't know. So I think understanding the why, like at the simplest level, is like, well, if you want to do better or have more of a role on your team or whatever it is, you can actually control that, is the first most important thing. Because if someone doesn't understand that, then they might go out a few times to train or do what the coach says, but they're not really going to connect with it. And then I think beyond that, so once there's even just a little understanding of why they're doing it, for a coach or a mentor or someone to explain actually what to do and how to do it is really important. Because I think a lot of times coaches discount the importance of the details of that. We forget, and I experienced this with my own coaches, and I had wonderful coaches and mentors as a young player. Like I didn't figure this out on my own. I had people who really inspired me and made me want to go do these things because they were brilliant in terms of how they communicated why I should be doing it, but also they literally showed me what to do, and not just what to do, but like how I should do it when I'm on my own. Because kids can go out, or players can go out and kind of go through the motions and do some stuff. A lot of kids will go and like, once they learn to juggle, they'll just do thousands and thousands of juggles, or they just go, shoot balls at an open net. And those things are maybe good for the first couple of days, but that's not really what you should be doing regularly. And that's not probably how you should be training the skills. So quite often, if a coach will say like, oh, I want everyone to go practice on your own. Well, like, what does that mean? Players don't know. Or I want you, in an end of season evaluation, I want you to improve X, Y, and Z. Well, what do you actually do? And not just what do you do, but like a demonstration or working with the player and saying, okay, this is exactly what I think you should do. Go home and do this 3 times, this next week before I see you next. That kind of instruction is so powerful because it's tangible, and it also will give them a visual of like what they should look like when they're training on their own. Because a lot of players, unless they take video of themselves, they're not seeing if their body language is lax or whatever they're doing. And, they're used to a coach being there and saying, oh, okay, pick up the pace or more intensity or whatever it is. But it's hard to have that self-awareness when you're on your own. So an actual specific instruction and demonstration, I think, are really important, especially, when players are starting out with the idea of taking their soccer ball home and doing this. Which, by the way, this is a total side note, but actually something I didn't ever think about that a coach had brought up at one point. This is a little bit of a tangent, but that some soccer players don't even have soccer balls at home. Like that is probably the most important thing, is if you should probably have some soccer balls around the house, even if they're like used or whatever. Like I've had a parent be like, well, actually my kid doesn't have a ball, so they couldn't do it, which fair. That's a big barrier. But yeah, back to kind of like the points of an individual program and what makes it successful is, I think it's like at the most basic level, the specifics of what to do. And I think then going beyond that, ways to actually measure it and to feel improvement. Like one of the great reasons that juggling is one of the first skills that players should probably practice individually when they get to a certain point is that it's so easy to track and measure. You can tell how many juggles you can do with your right foot versus your left foot. And that was probably the first way I engaged with individual training, because there's naturally a way, like I had my records, I would cross them out, I would write my new one. A lot of other skills in the game are a lot more, that's a lot less tangible. It's more ambiguous as to, do I feel like I'm getting better? It's hard to know. So until players are used to being self-aware enough to actually feel if they're doing it better and to get that feedback, giving measurable ways to practice things and improve them, or even just like numbers of things to do. I want you to, strike the ball 20 times with your right foot and 20 times with your left foot, go out to the field and do that. That's specific enough where somebody can measure what they're doing and they know, like, did they do enough? Did they not? So I think numbers and ways to track things are really important. And then, finally, I think, and this is probably maybe the most important point of all of them, is it has to be sustainable and it has to be enjoyable. Like if you're asking players to do a ridiculous amount of training, or if the expectation is someone's going to do an hour a day on their own, that's a lot. Like I think honestly, going out and doing 10 or 15 minutes is a really good starting point. And that's something that everyone could do. Everyone can spend 10 or 15 minutes a week extra as a starting point. If you're asking your players, before I see you next, I want you to do this. If it's more than 10 or 15 minutes, you're already going to have a huge drop off on your team of who's willing to do it. So basically starting with a point where nobody can have any excuse not to do it. Even if the weather's bad, you can do 10 minutes of footwork in your house. You can find a way to do that extra work regardless. And then, yeah, like if it's not fun, maybe even a player will last working on their own for 10 years. That's a long time. But then if they never want to play the game again, who cares? So if it's not enjoyable and it's not continuing to inspire and motivate the player, it's really not going to be successful in the long term. And that's always relative. Like enjoyable, I mean, I did a lot of fitness and really hard stuff on my own that was not enjoyable in the moment, in the rain. I have memories of like doing these shuttle runs to prepare for college fitness testing, and I was crying because I couldn't make the times. But the reality is the joy came from the fact that I knew that I was preparing and I felt really proud of it. So enjoyable doesn't always mean like you have to be laughing and loving every second, but there has to be a feeling of meaning and joy that comes from the overall picture of what you're doing. It could be listening to music. It could be, my parents sometimes would come with me to train and we'd chat while I was kicking the ball against the wall. I had that camaraderie feeling. So just finding ways that it works in someone's life and it's something they want to be doing is vital, because otherwise, yeah, it could even last years and years. And if it doesn't, if players aren't finding that joy and that meaning in it, it's really, at the end of the day, not going to be successful. So yeah, again, I have a lot of thoughts on these things, but I think those are all absolutely vital. If you want to, if success means that a player really connects with the game long-term and that this is an impactful thing in their life, not just on the field, then I think all of those elements really need to be present.
Again, I love it. It's really, really succinct and a great answer. Three easy things, well, not easy, three simple, but maybe not so easy things to make sure that your program, whatever you're doing with your players to do it. I think it's great. Obviously, knowing what to do, being specific. I'll never forget this. I had a coach who told her, she was a young coach, told her, hey, just go to the park with a ball. And one of her players came back and was like, okay, I went to the park with a ball, but I didn't know what to do. So I just went home. And it was a great lesson to learn in that. And then the measurement piece to me is probably one of the most, like, to me, that's at least me as a player and me as a coach, like that's what's motivating and enjoyable, is like you see that improvement. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, just yesterday, like my son came in and he was like, Dad, I broke my juggle record. And it was just this like, cool moment that he was like so excited about. Because it's so easy to like, it's black or white. Like I broke it or I didn't break it, or I improved or I didn't improve. And then the sustainability piece obviously is vital for anything to go. Because if you're not doing it over time, then it doesn't really do anything. So on that same note, are there things that you've seen that really don't work or lead to failure most often?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I think asking players to do something that's unreasonable or more than they can do never works. Through Techne, we've had parents contact us and say the coach wants a player to do an hour and a half of training in the app. And like, as a professional player, I wouldn't do an hour and a half of that kind of work. It takes intense focus. It's exhausting if you're working at the right tempo. It's just like not appropriate. So anytime that you're asking players to do something that is going to cause them to go way out of their way, or it doesn't seem possible for them, they're just not going to do it. I think similar, like your example is a really good one. If you just say something very vague, you will have a couple athletes on your team who are really special and can figure it out. But otherwise, yeah, people don't know what to do. So if you don't tell people exactly what to do, not that many people, unless they have parents who are elite players or something, like, are going to figure it out. So I think those are two really key factors. I think something else that can really go wrong with this is if you're incentivizing or rewarding the wrong things. So as a coach, I know most players, I think, really want to please their coaches. Even the ones who maybe misbehave or don't work that hard probably are doing that because they don't feel like they can succeed. Like most young people I've ever encountered, even in like random clinics or whatever, want to do well. They want someone to tell them they're doing well. If they can't, then they go really far the other way sometimes. But I've been on teams where literally a coach will be like, oh, whoever, I like the way you're wearing your socks, or something like so random. And I then think of, oh, should I do it like that? Or players want to do what has been called out or what attention has been brought to. So as a coach, if you're always saying, rewarding things or commenting on things that require talent or that are not under players' control, it can be demotivating. But if you are calling attention to improvement, or, wow, I can tell you worked on that, or hard work or effort, then more players are going to want to do that. So I think if you're telling players to train on their own, but at the same time, always rewarding or calling attention to the things that don't require that type of diligence and effort, then it kind of is going to be confusing to the players. So that's not even something that has to do with the actual training program, but it's just how you organize your team environment and how you think about what things you call attention to or celebrate versus what things you don't.
Great, thank you. So a lot of, I think I've talked to a lot of coaches and a lot of club leaders who have tried to create systems on their own, create homework programs or whatever you want to call them, to encourage and reward kids for training on their own. Are there examples that you can think of, not just at the individual level, but at the club level, that you've seen that have been successful?
Absolutely. I think that unfortunately, not many clubs do a really great job of this. I feel like some of my environments growing up did do a pretty good job. And I've tried to kind of replicate systems to encourage that through Techne, but at the same time, tools or, technology and all these things are only as good as the communication and the efforts to implement them. So I think these things, whether you're making up your own program, you have something else, or you use Techne, whatever it is, these things kind of all require the same types of thought processes. And the first one I would say that I've noticed, and I have an example that always comes to mind about this, but it's about creating routines. I am a very routine oriented person naturally, but I also know that if there are consistencies in environments, other people get on board who wouldn't usually be as consistent. So for a little while, I was helping to kind of come and be a guest coach for this. Maybe there were a U11 or U12 girls team here. From New Jersey, so I was here in New Jersey, and every day when they showed up at training, they'd come and pass around, do whatever. And the beginning of training was that they would do this skill test type thing, and it was, I forget the exact order, but basically you had to do maybe, let's say, 50 foot juggles, 20 thigh juggles, whatever head juggles, and then a certain number of foot, thigh, head, whatever it was. It was appropriate for their skill and ability. You could drop the ball, so it didn't require you to have done it perfectly. But obviously, if you drop the ball, you waste time. And it was basically a race to complete this series. And I can't even remember the series. Honestly, when I went, I couldn't remember the series, but they did it every single training session. So all the players knew it. And they went home and practiced it because they didn't want to be embarrassed. They didn't want to be the last one going, and they got competitive and they knew it, and they knew every training session they were going to start with it. And things like that to either start or end training naturally encourage players to then go home and work on them because it's part of the routine. It's something they know, and it becomes special as part of the culture of what you're doing. So whether it's club-wide or team-wide, I think routines and understanding of expectations are really important. Like we've had clubs every Monday, the coaches assign the individual work for the week. And so what we say with Techne is it's more important to tell players when you have access to a tool or there is a program that players can follow, to just tell them a reasonable amount of how much to do, and then to let them explore the tool or go, even it could be through, if you don't have Techne, it could even be through YouTube. You send them a YouTube link to it, some training ideas, and say, okay, pick what you want to do and do it for before I see you next 30 minutes total. So you could do and explaining this to players, you could do 10 minutes 3 times, you could do 30 minutes all at once, but your assignment is to do this amount of work. And they know that every Monday, and then every Friday, in Techne, the coach can see what someone's done. So they would check it every Friday, that they see who's done it, and give a shout out to those players, or have the players, even self-report, here's what I did, and here are the days I did it, because those type of routines become part of the culture, and it becomes part of the norm that your expectation is your participation in the club or the team is that you're not just showing up to training, but that's part of your participation. Just like in school, a good example is school homework, which has a negative connotation, but all, when you go to school, that you're going to do your work for the day, and then you'll have to take something home. You do that, and usually the teacher has some way of checking it, or otherwise no one would do it. But people get used to the routine and how it's going to be checked, and it just becomes part of the norm of the culture of what you do. And so the best implementation of things like this that I've seen, connect it to the in-person environment and have some sort of system when when it's going to be getting assigned, what you're supposed to do, and then when it'll be checked. And that accountability and the standards that are set are hugely important. So, and with that too, I'll just say one more thing that I've noticed that works really well is celebrating players who are doing it well. So, and social media is nowadays a really good way to do this, like encouraging players to post videos of them training, to take a picture and show what creative area they trained in. It requires creativity. Maybe you had to shovel snow in your driveway, or maybe you had to go, I used to go when it was raining in a parking garage where there was a cover, and having people feel proud of that, to be able to share it and it gets shared, or if somebody's done a certain amount of something or really worked hard, that they get featured on social media, or a nice shout out is a really nice thing to do as a club. So we've had clubs make special note to give like a hardest worker of the month type award or something like that, where they are acknowledging not just the players who score goals and are the star of the team, but the people who have worked hard or shown a certain level of improvement. So linking what you're asking people to do at home to the culture of what you have in person, and actively celebrating those things is always, I think, the best practice. And we've seen, I've seen clubs, and with Techne, we work with clubs who do a really great job of those things. I think success doesn't look like 100% of people doing it. That's never going to be the case. It's extra for a reason. But generally, when it's the norm and the expectation, you see that most people do it if they think they're supposed to do it. It's when, it seems like something extra that no one's paying attention to, then you have your usual couple high performers and everyone else, ignores it. So I think, I find it fun when I see people doing stuff like that, because I want to get involved. Like, I wish I remembered that skill test that team did, because I would still probably practice it today.
Very excellent, amazing. So, yeah, I think it's a whole different kettle of fish too, right? As a coach, if you're doing something, with your team or a few of your players, and you have a few players that want extra and they ask you something, that's one thing. But to systemize that in a club at different age groups and different skill levels is a whole different kind of animal to bite off, and you have to get obviously buy-in from all your coaches. And okay, so we need the 2011 coach to be doing the same thing, similar expectations as the 2009 coach, and you have all these kind of different personalities and people in there, and that becomes a whole different thing. But I really like the point that you made about, one, communicating those expectations, obviously from a club director down to your coaches, and then from your coaches to your players, and then really celebrating like those that are doing really well. And frankly, that's what I personally love about Techne, which my son uses every week. Not enough to be on any leaderboard, but the leaderboards that come out, and we do that at NorCal. Obviously, we're publishing anyone in NorCal, and the leaderboards are who's just putting in the most time. And I love that aspect of it, to be able to, really catch kids doing things great, doing well. So
Yeah,
cool.
just to add to what you said, I think educating the parents is really important too. So yeah, the coaches in the club all have to be bought in and kind of aligned on this is something we do, but the parents are a huge part of this, because they, at the end of the day, the kids shouldn't need them to do this, but they do facilitate, and it is totally okay for the parents to remind their kid, hey, did you do your homework? Like that's a normal level of facilitation. So if the parents understand the importance and are bought in and supportive of it, it really, really helps, because they're the at-home coach, so to speak.
Yeah, and helping them understand what to do and what those kids should be doing is a big part of that too, right? Because they're off. It's one thing, me telling my son what to do. I've been coaching for years and can do that, but if it's someone who doesn't have that background of, how do they help their child like complete that homework or do whatever it is? It's one thing when it's like math homework, right? You're like, okay, well, math is math for the most part, until you get the new math. But most parents get gone through math and figured that out and can help them with the math homework. But this piece is obviously you need some sort of experience sometimes. So if you were running a youth club, and we touched on this a little bit already, but what would your kind of individual training program for those players look like? Can you walk us through kind of some of dive into some of the specifics of what you would require and how you would do it and how you communicate it, et cetera?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, this is probably a cheat answer, but I think like using Techne is my creation I don't run a club, but that is how I envision it working. And again, nobody has to have Techne to do this. It's a tool that's meant to make it easier. I think one of the greatest challenges with this, before I explain how I would maybe do it, is the combination. You mentioned the Techne leaderboards that are, where players, depending on how much they train, can get on the leaderboards. So the concept behind that was basically, regardless if you're 9 years old or 20 years old, or if you're a star player or like a new player to the game, you could still compete, because it's about your dedication, your commitment to improving yourself wherever you are. The drawback of that is that it's you have to go through a timer. So it is that you've used the app that much, but obviously you don't know what someone's doing. So we see people, it kills me. We see people on the leaderboards with a ridiculous number of hours of training. Like they clearly have not trained with intensity and done that. And it drives me crazy. So I think any good training program, if I were to implement, needs to have a combination of that, so that anyone can participate and feel good about themselves, but also have some accountability to ability in the game, because we can't fool ourselves to think that part doesn't matter. So I think that I would actually base my program around a set of skill tests, and these actually exist in the app too. But on a test where you're having to perform something with technical efficiency to show how well you can do whatever the skill is, there's juggling, dribbling, and wall work, which is basically passing and receiving. And a club can make up whatever set of tests they believe in. These happen to be kind of like time trial formats. So they're all 1 minute long, and it's how many repetitions you can successfully do in a minute. So it's very standardized. It doesn't take long to do, but then there's systems to score. I think I would base the core of the program when I implement around that, because at the end of the day, you could spend as much time as you want, but if you're not actually improving your core capabilities as a player, you're not doing it right. Also, like, it could be as fun as you want or whatever, but the point is to get better as a soccer player. So I think I would do something surrounding those tests where it combined a competitive element of seeing who was the best in the club at different things. And that's really important, because it also allows players who are aspiring to that to see what it looks like. It doesn't need to be demoralizing, like, oh, I'll never get there. Like, I would love to see what it looks like for like Messi or someone to do some of the things I work on, because that is cool. That's really inspiring. Like, if I keep working, I could maybe look like that. Well, probably not. No one can look like what Messi would look like, but so maybe a bad example. But so I think it should be based on that. And then I think there are different layers that I would add in. So I think I would keep track basically of who was the best at all these skill tests across the whole club, because maybe you have a 9-year-old who's actually better than some of the 12-year-olds at these skill tests. It doesn't mean they're a better player and they should be on the field instead of them, but it means they are really impressive at whatever they're doing and they've mastered that skill. And then based on that too, I would also have an understanding and some type of tracking of who's improving at these tests and how much they're improving, because I think that's a really motivating metric. Because as a younger player, you can improve more quickly than maybe some of the older players who are at the top of the skill test and they have these small margins. So it adds another layer of where someone can succeed. And then after that, I would also have the layer of simply putting in the work. So who has consistently, and I think consistency to me is more important than just overall amount. So who has trained 30 minutes a week extra all year? And that's, to me, that is the most important group to celebrate, because that's an unbelievable achievement to have consistently done something. Or who has a training streak, 10 minutes a day for an impressive amount for 30 days. That's a great thing to celebrate. So I would develop all these layers of competition and of celebration. And it would start with ability, just who is the best at these skills, and then work from there in terms of rewarding different types of dedication and commitment to improvement. And I think that those various ways to reward players really can capture the largest group of players. So I'd probably implement something club-wide where there are testing days throughout time where actually your score, you test at training with your coach at some point that week and everyone's scores are validated. Maybe it's once a month. And then where in between that time, coaches would expect the players to be doing some amount of work, working on relevant skills to improve those tests, or even practicing the tests, because to be honest, in practicing the tests, you're going to get better. So I would create a kind of a layered system on how the teams and players track things. And it's complex because you start to reward one thing and then people find a loophole, and you start to reward something else and they find a loophole. So I think if you really want to capture everybody and give the most chance for success, you kind of have to have this nuanced approach to all these different elements. And I can't say I would do it well, but that's what I would try to do.
Yeah, I was as you were describing that, I was trying to think. Obviously, I've implemented my club, the club that I used to work with, implemented something similar. We had testing, and then we did Techne, or we did other things along those lines as well. But we never put it together in that way to like combine not only your raw score but your improvement percentage, where are you at on the curve, and then like your total time, which I think is a really I would love. I'm building a spreadsheet in my mind right now to try to put all that together, and I think it's a really, really cool answer to the question, and really detailed. That anyone, if any club out there has something, I would love to see it, because now my mind is just flying down that way. Can you talk a little bit about obviously we've mentioned Techne a few times. Techne is a partner of NorCal Premier. We use it consistently, not only in our PDP, but we kind of make it available and celebrate the players within NorCal Premier who use it the most or have the highest scores in the app. Can you maybe give a little bit to maybe those who maybe aren't as familiar with it on the call of here is how this really works within your club and how that would fit into kind of what you just described?
Sure. So at the most basic level, Techne, and this is where the idea originated and where the app originated. It's a mobile app, so anyone can download it from the App Store. And at the most basic level, it is meant to be a tool for individual players who are at home to not have to, if they want to answer the question, how do I get better? Like, what do I do? That way they don't have to search YouTube or go on Instagram and see trick shots and all this crazy stuff. It actually lays out a program that you can follow every week and get better. And also, not just follow the program, but also to track how much you're doing over time, to schedule reminders for yourself to train. So it's really based on the individual player having the tools at their disposal, whether they know the game or not, or they have an individual coach or not, or you can have almost nothing. All you literally need is a soccer ball. We say a ball and a wall. You could probably even do it without the wall, and you can follow the program and get better. The way that clubs use it is there are a wide variety of ways that clubs use it. But I think if you really wanted to implement it to the fullest, a club can basically offer Techne through the club to all the players. So one, you're offering this great benefit that the players and most honestly, the parents really appreciate, because you're giving access to this resource that kind of lays out how to do it. But then there are ways that you can track in what we call our manager portal, what your players are doing. So you have access to see all of the metrics. You would have to pull it together to create a system like I just described, which, by the way, now I'm thinking of how we could develop this system, but you have access to see all of your players' scores in the time trials and how they rank. There's a self-reporting element. So you all know your players and would know if, Jimmy said he's doing a certain score, that maybe that might not be true if that player isn't of that level. But so there's a self-reporting element, but as a coach, I think you could kind of see into that. You can see what the players are doing and at what times. You can literally see their log of training. So if someone says they've done a ridiculous amount and you see it's all the same drill over and over, you might have a talk with them. But so there's a level of insight into what your players are doing and how they're using the app, where you could ask them to do something and you can actually see. So you can see their scores, you can see who has training streak, how often players have trained. You can, and so you could track all kinds of things like that in addition to actually assigning work through the app. So you could, I said, for example, on Monday, you could say, I want everyone to do 30 minutes before I see you next. And then you could actually log in right before training and see who did it and go down the list and say, great job. These 8 players did what I asked. Again, it's self-reported. So you'll know if someone's saying they're doing all this training and it doesn't reflect on the field, you might want to ask them and engage on what they're doing. So it is a tool that can be used to achieve all of those things through offering the resource to the players and then having a certain level of insight into seeing how they're using it and to assign work. But like anything, the tool is only as good as how it's communicated and how it's implemented. So a huge thing we try to do with clubs is we try to help to educate the coaches and the leadership on how we recommend it to be used. But we've had people come up with creative ideas that we didn't even think of, or they use it differently, and that's all good and okay. But yeah, it's really, you have the capability as a club or as a coach to see a level of insight into how the app is being used by your players and to ask them to do certain things and then verify if they're doing it.
So we have a few questions from the audience, or those who are joining us. One question, and I hope I get this right. So if I don't, for whatever reason, please feel free to throw it in the chat that I totally screwed it up. But how do you feel about like a parent approval gate for players completing their homework in addition to their other expectations? So I as I read this, I think about, okay, the player completes it, and then the parent kind of has to check off that, yes, this actually happened.
I like that idea. I will say parents happen to be the biggest cheaters in this. We have had, it is crazy. So through all the wonderful feedback I've gotten, we've also gotten some crazy emails. A parent written a 5-paragraph email. And this, by the way, these are not like exception things. These things happen. We have a lot of players using this. So our support team, it's a former professional player who does our support emails. And the thing she brings to me, parents, so distraught. I was supposed to log my player's time. I forgot. My player's going to be so mad at me. And we're like, well, why are you logging your player's time? That means they're not actually doing the training. Or so I would say, the parent approval thing can work great. It can also, parents sometimes are the biggest conspirators to getting their kids on the top of the leaderboard. It is shocking to me the type of things that parents are instilling in these players. Sometimes that obviously is a generalization. So some of the parents are wonderful and like really can hold their players accountable. I do think a level of accountability, meaning we've actually thought of implementing this in the app, but some kind of verified time trial score or some type of verification, I think is a good idea. Definitely having the parents be vigilant, and the parents don't have to understand the nuances of the technique the player's working on, but it's like, did you watch your player and did they practice juggling for 10 minutes? I think any parent could say yes or no to that, or just an understanding that, this is what we've asked of your kid. You don't have to understand it soccer wise, but just, having the parent sign off that they appear to have put the effort in that was asked, I do think could be a good. I would say though, it is insane the level of it's actually kind of sad sometimes as to what is being displayed or taught to the kids through some of the parents' insistence that, I forget, there's we have a ton of crazy emails we've gotten that parents are asking or like really angry because something or other in the app, and it's like just the totally wrong message. But so I would say that is one small barrier to that being a successful method, but definitely a good idea.
Yeah, I remember when we implemented Techne in the last club I was working at, we had a few weeks or a few months or whatever our cadence was when we were celebrating kids, where there's just like, there's no way you did this. There's no way like you sat and had the app open and just like hit go, go, go again every time. Like it was crazy, but obviously it was pretty easy to find out from our coaches and like, yeah, there's no way.
Everyone knows, everyone knows. And actually, even now in the app, we have on the leaderboards in the app, you can click on the player's profile and actually see their training log. So we've tried to add an aspect of accountability. Some players don't care, but if you see somebody's training at 11:45 at night, maybe they didn't do it. I don't know. But so there's a level of accountability or visibility, I would say, in that we've tried to, this is like the biggest thing that plagues me, honestly, is the accountability aspect. And so anytime we have the tracking, there is that question mark. I think that's where like the in-person feel to things is so important. The actual conversation of show me what you worked on, or yeah, talking to a parent saying, this is what we're expecting. Did you see your player do it? That always helps.
Yeah. So the other question we have here is, do you have any resources you can share digitally about building a homework center? My assumption is like, yes, it's the Techne app. But I wanted to I actually have an answer to this as well, but I wanted to ask you first.
Sure.
Let you answer first.
I'm curious to hear your answer too. I mean, I think I will always tell people, you don't need to pay for something to do it. Like obviously I have a business and people use Techne, but as an individual player or as a club, there are definitely free ways to do this. I think Techne does make it a lot easier and it kind of consolidates it, but most simply, you can make a YouTube playlist. I started sharing training ideas on YouTube first, and I have a YouTube channel. I can even, we can distribute after this call or whatever. And it's basically, I modeled Techne based on what I think is a much easier way to experience the training. But if you wanted to compile training ideas for your players, it'd be very easy to create a YouTube playlist or even a PDF where you share some ideas kind of laid out in writing and link to various YouTube links. You could film videos and, put them on YouTube as demonstrations and kind of create something that is pretty, a spreadsheet and have links to things. So there are definitely free ways to do this and to have all the resources at someone's disposal to kind of follow and track, or just to, if you say, hey, go train for a certain amount of time, well, you could have categories as to, if you want to improve this, here are some videos to look at. If you want to improve this, and you can compile all of that. That's essentially what we've done through Techne, through a much more robust, like years and years of filming all these things, but it's definitely possible to do for free. And I'd say YouTube is the first thing that comes to mind as a good resource to use.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, but only that this is an area that I mentioned at the start of the webinar. NorCal has an entire web page or web pages of information and resources for coaches, for parents, for club directors, and this is something that both myself and Andrew Taylor, who also works here at NorCal, we are actively working on building. So this was a topic that as you were answering the question about how would you structure the program in your club, and you went, okay, these three things, and how would I measure them? I went, I'm going to build a spreadsheet and put it on our resource center so people could do it. And so that's something that I think NorCal will look to build over the next 6 months to a year, and hopefully have a lot of these, and homework or these kind of resources will be one of those. We also have, and I'll have to go to the NorCal YouTube site to check this as well, but I know a few years ago, we filmed a ton of this content, and it was all done under PDP. So it was a PDP like training program, and this was pre Techne, and it was before any of that. So we just put it on a YouTube channel, and I believe all that information is probably still up there somewhere. So I'll have to go find it and see if I can share that as part of our show notes in the email that we send out to everybody. Because there was a ton of individual training and testing stuff that we did with all of our PDP players. So I can see if I can find that for everybody and send it out as part of our kind of follow-up here. But I think we have some videos, and I'm sure I know for a fact there's 5,000 different YouTube videos. If you just search, individual player training, I'm sure you can find a ton of stuff too. But I think one thing that we'll put on our list to do is create a quick document of, what are the big points from this conversation, right? Hey, you got to keep things very specific. You got to keep them attainable. You got to keep them enjoyable. You have to communicate it really well. You have to, here are the keys for success for a homework program. Here are some resources as far as videos and things you can go see. And by the way, if you want to track it, here's a template document that you can use to do that. Or you could just go sign up for Techne and do it, make it much easier. So I think that's something that we'll look to build over the next couple months here, and hopefully have that available for everybody. Okay, I have one last, it's not even a question actually. I got a text from one of our coaches on the webinar, Troy Dyack, who's a very famous player from Northern California here, runs a club called West Coast Soccer, and he has a former player of his who played for Gotham, and texted me and said, "Hey, we gotta have a shout out." So I'm probably gonna butcher this name, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Delanie Sheehan.
Yes, I have
Is that correct?
Yes, I would like, I actually will I will further the shout out just for any of you who are going to watch the NWSL final on Saturday. Delanie is a player who has been on, like since I came into the role as general manager at Gotham 2 years ago, Delanie's been on the team. She barely played at all last year. I actually couldn't tell you how many minutes, but it was very few. She was kind of a player that we thought, you know what, can she stay at the level? She's a really good training player. She has a great attitude. And we got a new coaching staff going into this season. And Delanie is now a starter on our team. She's arguably up there with she's one of the most impactful players for us this season. She did not change who she is. She continued to chip away and do everything right in training. She had a good attitude. She accepted her role when it wasn't what she wanted. And she has absolutely flourished this year. And she happens to really fit what our coaches are looking for and stuff. And it's just been a wonderful positive, like, you have new coaches come in and sometimes the opposite happens. There's a player that was in favor and not, but it's been a wonderful positive for us this season to see her really take on this role that they've given her and do a phenomenal job. So if you're watching on Saturday, I don't know the lineup yet, but Delanie has been a starter kind of in all of these important playoff games. She scored a really important goal for us in the quarterfinal. So definitely look out for her. I think she might go under the radar a little, but she's a really special player, very smart, very good on the ball. She's been a great link for us and doesn't get that much credit because she's surrounded by all these national team stars. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about Delanie. Also just a really, really wonderful person. She's one of the people you want to succeed. So yes, I love that shout out.
Yeah. Well, we always try to celebrate the players that kind of make that next level out of NorCal. And obviously we played, almost no part in that. It's all her and her coaches and her journey. But we just love to celebrate it. So always love to hear those stories, and we try to do our best to track it all. So Troy, thank you very much for giving me the heads up and us being able to shout it out. And if you aren't watching the game on Saturday, I don't know what's wrong with you. You gotta watch the game. Got to support NWSL as it grows, and can't wait to be able to support Bay FC next year as they enter the league. We have a local team here. So, okay. So with that, I think that is about all the time that we have. I want to thank Yael, obviously, for her time in this important week for her and her team. And thank you for all the expertise and valuable information that you shared. But before we go, is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I was just thinking about one last thing. In all of this, it is great. The volume of impact you can have as a coach is something to think about, like how many players can you get to train on their own or whatever it is. But really, I think there are some players who are going to be more receptive and who really want that support and that influence. And potentially the greatest impact you could have is to really connect with the several players who really want that. And that's what I feel about Techne, is that I would love to have hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of players using the app. But really what matters to me is the smaller group that is hopefully grows, who it really changes their life and allows them to live their dream as a player. So as a coach, And I was this player. I was so ready to receive motivation, inspiration, listen to what a coach wanted me to do. I would say it's okay to spend extra time and energy on those players, and it probably will be more impactful even than trying to convince somebody who's never going to do it to do it. And so, of course, you don't want to ignore players. You want to include everyone. You never know who's going to be impacted the most. But at the same time, there are the players who are really seeking that extra support and more primed to do these type of things on their own. And I think it's okay to give them a little extra. I had coaches who stayed after with me and hit long balls and who showed me, challenged me to things and spent extra time talking to me about what I could work on. And those things, they made me as a player. That's why I feel passionate talking about this. So I definitely think it's okay to pinpoint the players who you feel like are more receptive and to give them that extra bit of attention. That's not a bad thing to do.
Amazing. Well, again, Yael, thank you so much. That's a wonderful note to leave on. And thank you to everyone in attendance and everyone who submitted questions and participated. This recording will be available on our website shortly, probably later this week. So please go check it out. We'll share it via email along with any resources, notes, and everything that we can collect from this. Also, stay tuned for our the next show in our club development series. We're going to be discussing implementing a college recruiting program, and we're hoping to get that scheduled soon. So once again, thank you, Yael. Thank you, everyone who's here, and good luck on Saturday.
Thank you. My pleasure, guys. Good to virtually meet you all. Take care.
Thank you.